Hello, and welcome into another episode of the Cannabis Man podcast. Thank you so much for clicking on the show. I'm your host, Don Kleppen, and if it's your first time here, welcome in. This is a show where we're trying to take a journalistic look at all things cannabis. I'm a personal cannabis user of about 18 years or so, and I'm a broadcaster in Chicago, and so I combined my love of cannabis and my broadcast abilities into this podcast here, mainly because I felt like the conversations when cannabis was becoming more legalized around the U.S., I felt like the conversations just didn't really change as much as I thought they were going to. Ultimately, I still feel like more people know about the kind of reefer madness propaganda, stoner humor related to cannabis rather than the medical benefits, the quality of life improvements that cannabis might be able to offer them. And so on this show, I like to interview experts in the space, whether they be entrepreneurs who are making new products for you to try or experiences for all of us to enjoy related to cannabis. I also talk with doctors, researchers who are looking into studying specific questions, answering what do specific cannabinoids, what symptoms do they elicit in all of us. And I speak with policymakers, government officials who have been elected or appointed who are now responsible for establishing framework, laws, policies that are going to be the foundation for legal cannabis in the future. Now, if you haven't been listening, I am in the middle of a dry month. I've been doing my own modified dry January. I have been abstaining from cannabis, from alcohol, from added sugars, from caffeine, and from meat for the entire month of January. I'm recording this on the 25th of the month, and thankfully I have just a week left until February 1st, and so I'll give you kind of an update as to how my month has gone, how I've been feeling, and some tips and tricks as to how I've kind of been getting through this dry month. It has not been easy. If you haven't already, please leave a rating or a review for the show. It helps me out, standing out from other podcasts on different platforms. If you like what I'm doing here, go ahead and hit the 5 stars. Leave any kind of review that you can. All of that is very much appreciated. And if you want to support the show, scroll down in the description notes and hit that support the show link, and it'll take you to the Buzzsprout subscription page. You can become a subscriber. You get a shout out from me in the next episode and an email saying thank you. And as I've said, any support that I can get for doing this is so much appreciated. And I've got some other news stories, some exciting events coming up related to cannabis, one of which I will be attending in person. I'm very much looking forward to it, not only getting back into being able to use cannabis, but to attending events like these and meeting other people in the community. So I'll get to all that and more on this episode of the Cannabis Man podcast.
This is Tommy Chong, and you're listening to the Cannabis Broadcast.
Alrighty, and we're back. Thank you so much for listening to the show. I really can't thank you enough for listening to the show. I've been so blown away by how much this project of love that I've been doing has been growing. The numbers have been getting really good, and what I've been most impressed by are the locations around the world where people are listening. So I just wanted to send some shout outs to everybody who's listening. Obviously, a lot of people in the U.S. I'm loving reaching people in my home country here, but also in Canada, over the northern border. Hey, thank you so much for listening. Down in Australia, down under, thank you very much. New Zealand as well. Really appreciate you Kiwis tuning in. The Netherlands, ja Niederlander. And Germany, Deutschland, thank you so much for tuning in. And the United Kingdom, thank you so much for tuning in. From across the pond, Jamaica, Switzerland, and Finland as well. And then in the U.S., thank you everyone in Chicago, my home city. I love that people are listening here. Virginia, Hawaii, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, New York, Texas, and Wisconsin. Thank you all so much. I really cannot thank you enough for tuning in. It means so much to me that this project I've been doing, these stories, these people I've been talking with and trying to share with you, this development of cannabis here week by week, it really warms my heart, and I can't thank you enough. It's so meaningful to me, and I really, really appreciate it. And on that note, I I appreciate cannabis in general, and I can't tell you how much I'm looking forward to getting back into using cannabis. I mean, this dry month has been really, really difficult. I actually put out a poll a couple of weeks ago in the beginning of the month when I first started this dry month. I wanted to know who else has taken a tolerance break here in the cannabis community and what their experience was like. And so I put the poll out with the question, have you ever taken a tolerance break? And the options were, yes, I enjoy them, yes, and it sucked, no, but considering it, no, and never will. And for what it's worth, 75% of the respondents said yes, and it sucked. And I will count myself among those who say that dry months, I'm not lying to you here, these are not easy to get through. I think most of us I think most of you listening, I think myself, obviously, I have said in the past, and I'll continue to lean on cannabis heavily in my life for different reasons. I've leaned on it to help me get to sleep at night and stay asleep, kind of improve the quality of sleep in my mind. I use it to deal with stress or anxiety. I use it to deal with depression. I use it to deal with wanting some creative energy or focus. I use it for a lot of things. Any kind of nausea or stomach discomfort. I lean on cannabis for a lot of that stuff. And so going through this month as a regular daily user of cannabis for 18 years or so, going a month without it is difficult. It sucks. Not gonna lie, it does suck. But here I am sitting here talking to you on the 25th. I've got a week left until February 1st, and I'm thrilled. I have been feeling really good. As I've said to some of my coworkers and friends, people asking about the dry month and how it's going, because it's not just cannabis that I'm abstaining from, alcohol, added sugars, caffeine, and meat and all that, I've been noticing my sleep has been of good quality. And as I've talked about in episodes past, I'll mention it again, one of the things I notice is that my dreams are very, very vivid. It's normally tough for me to get down to sleep at night, and for help with that, I've been leaning on chamomile tea. I noticed that really does make a difference. I forgot to have some the other night. I just had peppermint tea instead, and I did have a hard time getting down to sleep. So the chamomile really does help. But I also think, I exercise as part of my routine to kind of help me get by without the cannabis, to deal with stress and anxiety and that kind of thing. Exercising in the morning really helps me get through that, as well as meditation, taking a 3-minute cold shower afterward. Those are parts of my routine that I've been leaning on more heavily during this dry month. Just to button up that poll, the other 25% who responded said no, but considering it. And I guess another question I've been getting as to why I'm doing this was because a tolerance break, I think it's good for all of us regular heavy users. Tolerance is something that we build up toward any substance, whether you're talking about caffeine, sugar, alcohol, or cannabis. We build up a tolerance to things that we use regularly. And so, there is a time, for instance, when I get back into cannabis, the first thing I'll start with is probably a pre-roll. I'll just light up a joint and see how that feels, and that is probably all I'm going to need when I get back into it to get through the evening. Just having one joint, whereas I might smoke 4 or 5 of those in a day when I'm using normally. Resetting that tolerance, I find, is also very good. Another thing is that I enjoy the clear-headedness. I was talking with my wife about this the other night, Gretchen, and I was saying to her that it's tough because one of the reasons I like cannabis so much as well is that it just takes the edge of life off in my mind. When my mind is sober and sharp, it can be kind of difficult. Maybe you have these thoughts that I have where you kind of spiral a little bit. If you're stressing about the future, if you're depressed about the past, sometimes I find in my sober state that I have a harder time softening the sharp edge of some of the thoughts that come up, and cannabis is something that helps me with that too. And so that's a part of the dry month that there's really no getting away from, but at the same time, as difficult as that is, as unpleasant as even I find it, there's another side of that clarity. There's another side of maintaining a clear head and focus, even just for this 1 month, where I'm able to make longer term plans, where I'm able to kind of look at my life and the direction of it and the path that I'm on and sort of decide if I need to reorient myself and sort of point in a different direction, look at the things that I'm doing, where my energy and efforts are focused, and if that is continuing to be worthwhile. And one of the things I like to do recreationally is I'm a big football fan. Love the NFL, love my Green Bay Packers, and, watching especially playoff football in the NFL, some of the times that have been most difficult in this month for me to get through have been during those NFL games. I normally love to have a beer or some cannabis while I'm watching, and I have not been able to do that this month. But January, I also think, as tough as that is for me, I think January is a good time to be reflective, to be clear-headed, and look at kind of where your life is going. If you're happy with things, if you're dissatisfied with things, I find that this period of clarity helps me not just decide whether or not I need to make changes, but actually decide what actions that I can take to make those changes. And honestly, as much as I love cannabis, that's something that I sometimes struggle with when I'm using cannabis regularly as I do. I'm not saying that I don't orient my life or that I don't take actionable steps and work on things that I normally do. That's not true. I do work as I normally do using cannabis throughout the year. But just in terms of making long-term plans and kind of being clear-headed about the decisions I'm making, that is a big part of why I think doing this in January makes sense. You get into the new year. You have your New Year's Eve. You really party. I certainly did. And then you just kind of have a period where you allow yourself some time to pull your head out of the fog, not just the fog of cannabis, but as I've said, caffeine, alcohol, added sugars, the crutches that we normally lean on. I kicked that out from under myself. And so it's been a difficult month, but I also feel stronger and better because of it. And so again, maybe this isn't something for you, but this is just something that I find is great, not just for my mind, but as I've said before, my wallet as well. I've certainly saved a lot more money this month than I do typically when I'm buying cannabis products. That is another benefit too. And to anybody wondering how I was getting through those NFL games or these kind of periods where I'd go and hang out with like my brother Danny or my cousin Zach, and we'd go out to bars and watch these games, this year I actually had some non-alcoholic beers. Most of the bars that I went to had at least a Heineken Zero. One of them had a Guinness non-alcoholic beer, and someone had a Lagunitas seltzer, which was calorie-free and sugar-free and alcohol-free as well. So what I found is that there's a lot more options out there than just the O'Douls, for if you like beer like I do, or there are some other options I talked about on a recent episode. There are some spirit companies who are making spirits without alcohol. They just use other botanicals so that you can make yourself a kind of mocktail or a non-alcoholic drink that still feels exotic enough and has a unique taste profile, and it kind of allows you to sip on something socially or have it in your hand when you would otherwise like a drink. And those are the kinds of things that I lean on to get through a dry month like this, finding suitable substitutes. Speaking of, I've got my cup of Ticino here instead of my normal cup of coffee. This particular flavor is dandelion turmeric, and it's dark roast like all the other Ticinos are, and this is another big way that I've been getting past the month without coffee. And so cheers, and I hope everything's going well by you. It's cooled off a little bit, but still tastes good. And speaking of coffee, that which I cannot have right now and I greatly look forward to getting back to, have you tried Split Rock coffee? This is a wonderful small business started by veterans sworn to protect America. It's veteran-owned, it's disabled-owned, and not only that, but they have some great products, so the business is worth your supporting, and I believe you would love this coffee as well. I cannot wait to get back to. I've already got a couple of bags also sitting here that I haven't been able to crack into just yet because of the dry month. Really looking forward to having a cup of this stuff. And if you're interested in it, you can scroll down in the description notes and click on the Vouch Store link, and you can get some Split Rock Coffee products along with some other stuff at the Cannabis Man store page on Vouch. I talked a little about that partnership last week on the episode. I'm going to be interviewing Kevin Brandis, who started it, and he can explain a little more about what led him to starting this idea and building it out, and which businesses he's looking to partner with to sort of allow people an opportunity to support small and worthy businesses and also try some products that I think you're going to love. And speaking of veterans, I have a great interview that I'm going to publish next week with Raul Molina. He's the COO of The Mint. And The Mint is a group of dispensaries. They're out right now in Arizona, Michigan, and Missouri, and they're coming to Illinois and Nevada. And The Mint is offering a discount to veterans every day of 22%. And Raul is going to talk about why they're doing that, as well as some of the other great work that's happening at The Mint. And again, I'll publish that interview next week, so tune in for that one. And speaking of getting back into cannabis, I've got a lot of products that are just sitting here that I've been staring at for the last couple of weeks from some of the great guests I've had, and I can't wait to try them and tell you about my experience with them. I also can't wait to get back to some of my beloved cannabis events. I love going to cannabis events and meeting people in the space and trying new products and just kind of talking with people, feeling the excitement and sort of bringing what those vibes are like back to you here on the show. And on that note, there is an event I'm going to February 3rd, next Saturday. It is a smoke out here in the city of Chicago. Always love, especially local events for me. It's being put on by Tree Huggers Chicago. You may remember, listener, I interviewed Brenda Lee, who started Tree Huggers early on in the show. Check out that episode if you haven't listened to it. She really is doing great stuff, and she's gathered a wonderful group of people who are part of these events and whatnot. There's going to be live music. This is happening at a private speakeasy, delicious barbecue, different cannabis vendors, drinks, games, and raffles. Tickets are $20, and you can find her at Thriving Not Surviving on Instagram now and get yourself a ticket there. But as I said, I will be at this event. I'll be chatting with people, talking about cannabis, trying products, and if you can make it out, I really look forward to seeing you there. Now I'd like to get to a news story that I thought was worth bringing to your attention. This is a positive cannabis coverage. This is from neurosciencenews.com. Cannabis may enhance empathy and brain connectivity. Now, empathy I've heard a lot about in the past for cannabis users. I certainly feel it's helped me in that regard, and a lot of the cannabis community that I'm familiar with. These are some of the most empathetic people that you're likely to meet. What do we mean by empathetic? Emotional comprehension and intelligence, picking up not just what people are saying to you, but sort of feeling what they might be feeling, allowing yourself to put yourself in their shoes, to really understand and feel, to not just, again, listen to what they're saying to you, but read it on their face, in the tone of their voice, feel it yourself in your emotional center, what they might be going through or what they've been through. That relatability, that connectivity between us, one of the most valuable pieces of the cannabis community that I think is there. But the heightened functional connectivity in the brain, specifically, according to this article, the anterior cingulate cortex, a brain region crucial for empathy. The article goes on to say the increased connectivity was particularly notable with the left somatomotor cortex, suggesting a better understanding of others' emotions. The key facts that the article outlines here, just 3 of them. 1, regular cannabis users demonstrated higher emotional comprehension, particularly in understanding others' emotions compared to non-users. 2, enhanced functional connectivity was observed in the ACC, especially with the left SMC, in cannabis users, indicating a deeper empathic processing. 3, the findings challenge traditional views of cannabis effects, suggesting potential positive impacts on empathy and social interactions. The study, for what it's worth, involved 85 regular cannabis users and 51 non-users, and they used an fMRI to look at the brain's functioning. I won't go through the rest of the article article. You should read it yourself, and I will share it in these description notes like I typically do with the articles I bring up on the show. Highly recommend you read the rest of it. A lot of good information in here. But on the flip side, unfortunately, if you've listened to the show at all, you've heard me talk about the lingering stigma that still exists against cannabis, the propaganda, the sort of ripple effects of reefer madness that society is still grappling with to this day. And this next news story has been making the rounds. I'm sure you've already seen it, but if not, I thought it was worth bringing to your attention for a few reasons. So I'll kind of go through what the headline is and a little bit of this information, and I'll go through why I think this, like a lot of other stories that are put out in the media, is just another example of that continuing fear-mongering that we're still dealing with. Okay, here is the article. It's from KTLA in Los Angeles. The headline reads, "Woman who fatally stabbed man 108 times gets probation, no prison time." So here's the meat of the story. Family members of a man stabbed to death by a Ventura County woman during an episode of cannabis-induced psychosis. This happened in 2018, and the family is basically outraged that a judge sentenced the 32-year-old woman to 2 years of felony probation and no prison time. She was convicted of involuntary manslaughter last month, killing 26-year-old accountant Chad O'Melia. Now, here is the information that they give. On May 27th, 2018, the 32-year-old went to O'Melia's apartment where they both took several hits from a bong filled with marijuana. Not cannabis. Notice the use of marijuana, which I've talked about is a loaded word, but that's another discussion. The woman, Bryn Spejker, Spejcer, experienced an adverse reaction, I'll say, from the marijuana and suffered from cannabis-induced psychotic disorder, authorities said. During that psychotic break, she stabbed O'Melia multiple times, eventually killing him. She also stabbed herself repeatedly. Now, I'm not going to go on and read the rest of this garbage because I think you can already see where this is going. This, to me, screams of the typical reefer madness propaganda fear-mongering of the last century. Here's my first question. Did they actually test what was in that bong that she smoked out of, or did they just see the bong and say, oh, that was marijuana? Because stabbing somebody 108 times and then, for what it's worth, stabbing herself in the neck, that doesn't sound like any stoners that I know. There was something else in that bong. I don't know if the weed was laced. I don't know if it was salvia. I don't know any of that because, shocking, there is no toxicological report or evidence in this article. No one says what her blood told investigators. Nobody said what actually was tested in that bong. This article gives none of those details. All it does is go on to sort of spell out how psychotic and ridiculous of an episode this was. But I got news for you. There are people out there who stab people all the time without smoking bongs of anything. And there's a lot more people who are smoking bongs around the world who don't go on and stab somebody over 100 times. So what bothers me as somebody who's in the media and who knows how these things work, this garbage is going to circulate for the next 3 fucking weeks. And everyone's going to be talking about how a psycho stabbed someone for 100 times after smoking a bong, setting us back 30 fucking years to the last century and talking about reefer fucking madness again. We are going backwards with coverage like this. This is not unbiased and neutrally presented. This is meant to stoke fear. This is meant to keep people afraid of cannabis. That's all stories like this serve to tell people. So I'm not going to spend any more time on it. I'm not even going to share this story. You'll be able to find it wherever you look. I'm positive of that. But when you are reading the body of whatever story you see related to this, I encourage you, look for chemical evidence. Look for what her blood had present in it. Look for any reports of what investigators found definitively in that bong, not just what police said that she had smoked. You will not find it. And that's why, to me, this is not new neutral or unbiased in its reporting. This is bullshit. This is the same old bullshit that we learned in the DARE public education rooms. This is the same old bullshit that was coming from the Nixon White House. And, I got to calm down a little bit here. Unfortunately, I can't use cannabis to help me calm down today as I'm still in this dry month. But boy, this has really got me riled up if you can't tell. And I apologize for the language, listener, but it's just, this is something that obviously gets under my skin. This bothers me a lot when stories are not presented neutrally, and it's the same old reefer madness propaganda that we're dealing with 50 years down the line from the Nixon White House. This is 50 years since the war on drugs started, and the attempts to tie cannabis to psychotic behavior like this. That's what bothers me. For what it's worth, I will reach out to some doctors, anybody who's in this area who maybe can talk more about it. I hope to bring you an interview related to this subject, so maybe we can explore it and peel back the layers a little bit more. But my point to you right now, and the way that I want to end this episode, is this. We cannot live in fear. I know the news, the 24/7 news, and I'm somebody who works in radio news, and I try very hard not to be a fearmonger. I try very hard not to just ring the alarm bell every time I'm on the mic, telling people something new they need to be afraid of. I think that's very irresponsible, and I think it's criminal. It's getting to a point where if you look at the violent crime statistics for last year, it fell 10% across the country in major cities. And yet, if you ask people what they think about violent crime, if it's trending downward or upward, what do you think they're going to say? They all say they feel it's trending upward. Why do they feel that way if it's actually trending downward by 10%, which is historic, by the way? That's a huge drop. Why do people feel the opposite? I'll tell you why. Because 24/7 news outlets and other news publications like this are constantly telling you what you need to be afraid of. And if you hear that 24/7, you're going to think the world is a lot more unfriendly and dangerous than it actually is. Instead, why don't you turn off the news, step outside, ingest some cannabis, and socialize with some people, increase your empathy. So instead of being fearful of your fellow humans, you can understand them better, emotionally connect with them, and live a more rich and fulfilling life. Because social connections and that person-to-person connectivity, that's the best stuff. That's the best parts of life. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and splash some cold water on my face and meditate before I head off to work here. But, the important thing is to maintain your critical thinking ability here. When you read articles like this, be able to suss out for yourself how legitimate what they're saying is. And I'll tell you what, I believe, anyone who's ever tried cannabis, non-laced, proper cannabis, which has been checked and verified by the legal dispensaries that are available in over half the states of this country. If you go into a dispensary and you try verified cannabis products and you experience what the rest of us experience when we use cannabis, you would know how fallacious stories like this really are, what garbage they really are. Anyway, that's all I've got for you this week. I hope you and your family are safe and enjoying some cannabis and all the good that life has to offer out there. Be sure to leave a rating or review for the show, this episode in particular, if you like, and become a subscriber and support the show by scrolling down in the description notes and hit that support the show link. Really appreciate everybody who's been chiming in and who's listening to this. I cannot thank you enough. It really means a lot to me. And I'll be back again next week with another episode of the Cannabis Man podcast. Bye-bye. Cannabis Man is 100% originally crafted by myself, Don Kleppen. Original theme music written and composed by Yusu Kim, aka Goodson.